In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro opens with a strong endorsement of Pete Hegseth's recent media takedown, focusing on the overwhelmingly successful U.S. Israeli military operation that virtually destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities. Despite clear evidence and authoritative confirmation from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, that the Fordo uranium enrichment plant was severely damaged and its centrifuges rendered inoperable, mainstream media outlets continue to cast doubt on the mission's success. This persistent media skepticism is framed as a deliberate effort to deny President Trump a historic foreign policy victory, with Hegseth excoriating the press for their relentless attempts to undermine the administration's achievements. Shapiro details the two-week Israeli aerial assault on Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure, culminating in a B-2 bomber strike authorized by President Trump that obliterated the deeply buried Fordo facility. The host emphasizes the unprecedented nature of this operation, a decisive blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions without American casualties or an ongoing war. Yet, the media's fixation on a low-confidence Defense Intelligence Agency report suggesting the facility was not destroyed has fueled a narrative of failure. This narrative is further bolstered by Iranian regime statements, which are dismissed as propaganda from a leader hiding in a bunker. The IAEA's Director General, Rafael Grossi, is cited to affirm the significant physical damage inflicted, noting that the precision-dependent centrifuges are no longer operational and that Iran's nuclear program has been set back by years, if not decades. Additional corroboration comes from Israeli intelligence sources and respected journalists, all aligning more closely with the Trump administration's account than the media's skepticism. The Pentagon's release of footage demonstrating the destructive power of the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs further undercuts media doubts. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's press conference is highlighted as a pivotal moment where he openly confronted the media's biased coverage. Hegseth criticized reporters for their obsession with undermining the mission's success and for focusing on trivial issues such as the gendered language he used to describe the pilots. His frustration with the press's refusal to acknowledge a major American victory is palpable, underscoring the broader theme of media hostility toward President Trump. Beyond the military success, Shapiro explores the diplomatic momentum following the strike. A reported four-way call between President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs revealed a shared enthusiasm for expanding the Abraham Accords and pursuing peace agreements with Arab states. Ambitious plans include ending hostilities in Gaza, replacing Hamas governance with administration by several Arab nations, and encouraging broader Arab and Muslim recognition of Israel. The U.S. is also expected to acknowledge limited Israeli sovereignty in contested territories, signaling a significant shift in American Middle East policy. Shapiro praises President Trump's broader foreign policy successes, including his historic NATO summit achievements, where he secured commitments from nearly all member nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP. This shift in burden sharing is portrayed as a game changer for continental security and a long overdue correction of European defense responsibilities. Turning to domestic politics, Shapiro delves into the rise of radical left-wing figures within the Democratic Party, focusing on Zoran Mamani, the newly victorious Democratic mayoral candidate in New York City. Mamani is described as a far-left socialist with extreme positions, including nationalization of resources, support for jihadi causes, and aggressive progressive social policies. His platform of wealth redistribution, increased taxation on corporations and the wealthy, and opposition to law enforcement funding is presented as emblematic of the Democratic Party's leftward lurch. Shapiro critiques the media and Democratic establishment for embracing Mani's candidacy as a sign of vitality and grassroots enthusiasm, while warning that such radicalism alienates moderate and suburban voters. The host argues that Mamani's policies will drive businesses and wealthy individuals out of New York, exacerbating economic decline. The broader Democratic Party is portrayed as fractured, with establishment figures dodging questions about Mamani and other radicals, while progressive icons like Bernie Sanders openly celebrate the insurgency against the party's traditional leadership. Shapiro also highlights troubling rhetoric from other left-wing Democrats, such as Jamal Bowman's controversial claims linking health disparities in the black community to racism, and Jasmine Crockett's unapologetic embrace of labeling opponents as xenophobic. These examples are used to illustrate the ideological extremism gaining ground within the party, which the host warns could lead to electoral disaster if unchecked. While the left's radicalization is seen as a potential boon for Republicans, Shapiro cautions against complacency. It stresses the importance of maintaining a Republican Party grounded in reality and pragmatism, warning that a fractured or ineffective GOP could allow a radical Democrat to ascend to the presidency. The 2024 election data is discussed, showing that President Trump's victory was bolstered by gains among young, non-white, and irregular voters, groups traditionally aligned with Democrats, but who defected in large numbers. This shift underscores the risks Democrats face if they continue to embrace extreme policies that alienate their base. Shapiro then shifts to legislative matters, focusing on the Big Beautiful Bill, a major piece of legislation encompassing tax cuts, immigration funding, and other priorities. The Senate parliamentarians' recent rulings have complicated the bill's passage by declaring several provisions non-compliant with budget reconciliation rules, which require a simple majority vote. This includes provisions aimed at Medicaid work requirements and student loan repayment reforms. The host explains the parliamentarians' advisory role and the possibility for Senate leaders to overrule her decisions, though Senate Majority Leader John Thune appears reluctant to do so, preferring to find alternative legislative paths. Shapiro frames this as a temporary setback rather than a fatal blow, emphasizing the urgency of passing the bill to sustain economic growth and counteract headwinds such as the ongoing tariff war and Federal Reserve policy uncertainties. Shapiro highlights ongoing successes within the Trump administration's executive branch, including Education Secretary Lynn McMahon's enforcement of Title IX against California's policies allowing boys to compete in girls' sports, and Energy Secretary Chris Wright's efforts to reverse Biden-era energy policies to stabilize electricity prices and support technological competitiveness. Conversely, a shocking report from the Daily Wire exposes corruption within USAID under the Biden administration, where contracts worth hundreds of millions were awarded to a company despite its key manager's guilty plea for bribery. This scandal is presented as emblematic of the Biden administration's mismanagement and corruption, reinforcing the need for Republican oversight and reform.